The good shepherd leads me to the water. I was about to ask if you wanted, or we about to sing. Go ahead. The good shepherd.
Oh no, I was doing the accept the thing for whatchamacallit.
I was like, let's sing, Shay.
I've never heard that song.
What? It shall not walk by Maverick City Music. This thing in Majesty is following me. Hey. Start off with some church. And then turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, I shall not want. Hey, open your hands and receive it.
I love
Come
it.
on, somebody. Oh, wish I had some help up in here. Up in here. Y'all not with me. Come on in this room.
It's the up in here for me.
Because how the preacher is like, oh, we know you've been in the streets.
Right?
When you say up in here twice, it's like, oh, okay, you're
Okay.
opening it up with me.
Okay. All right, DMX. Okay.
Right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. It is January 2023. We have made it to another year. This actually will begin the start of my official third year on YouTube, because it started January 2022. So, you know, this is the full-on start. So, hey, y'all have been rocking with me for a while. Thank you so much for being here. If not, this is our start to our third season of Writerly Conversations. Y'all. This has been a collab that has been going strong for what is going on our third year. What are you swatting at? Apply? Yeah. What is going on?
Writerly Conversations. Yeah,
it was a lot. I was trying to like ignore it at first, and then it was a lot.
I kept missing.
Okay.
I kept missing. You were saying Writerly Conversations, what a wonderful collab we have.
Season three. And it made sense that for season 3, episode 1, January 2023, we are talking about writing from the overflow and filling our creative well. Because as you know, the end of the year for writers everywhere is kind of hectic. We got Preptober, we got NaNoWriMo, we got December where you're filling in the gaps of whatever you finished in Nano or you were working on Nano, trying to get it ready because you're probably gearing up for Author Mentor Match or whatever it is that's going on this month, trying to get your manuscripts out, trying to get people to look at them and querying and all those good things. And so for those of us who are like, yo, I'm kind of exhausted, all my creative juices, I don't know where to go, how do I go next, what do I do? That's what we're gonna kind of talk about. And normally in January, we're creating a vision board and things like that. And so we decided to switch it up just a little tiny bit. Am I still gonna create a vision board? Probably. So make sure you hit that big red subscribe button so you will see me creating a vision board somewhere this month. And without further ado, I'll let my co-host introduce herself. Boy, if you don't stop whining.
Yeah, don't judge me for the gnat situation. No, little buggers are quick. But so wait, what am I doing? Introducing myself. Hi, I'm Britt. Writerly, as my really awesome sweatshirt says. Look at the hoodie if you haven't seen it already. My sister got it for me for my birthday. It's so cute. Look at little me on a pile of books, just read. How lovely. That's who I am, though. Me. I'm not this little person, obviously. Book and author too. It is what it sounds like. Half of the Writerly Conversations collab created by me, shared by Shay. And we are so happy for this third season. Y'all, we have so many good conversations lined up. So honestly, if you're not subscribed to both of us, if you're new to Shay's channel and you're like, I've never seen this crazy woman before, me being the crazy woman, now you've met me, subscribe to Shay's channel. But if you only subscribe to Shay, you're only gonna get half the Writerly Conversations. So do make sure to also subscribe to Britt Writerly so that you can get the other half of the Writerly Conversations. You're not gonna want to miss this season, or even really what we've begun to talk about for season 4. We're whipping in the kitchen, y'all. We're whipping in the kitchen. So let's get into it, because this conversation is so timely, because like Shay said, Preptober, NaNoWriMo, the final pitch wars or pit mad of the quarter, DV pit, right? Also all the different pits that are out there. There is like 5,000 at this point. Getting ready for author mentor match, because I think this is a January thing. So good luck if it is, if you're like out here in that circuit. And then don't let you be doing Vlogmas or some other like daily December content thing. Like, we understand you're poops, we're poops. So we do want to like talk to y'all about how you're feeling, how we're feeling, and how we sort of take care of ourselves in the beginning of a year where everyone is like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, it's a new year. And then the writers are like, yeah, it's new. What do I have to do? Like, you can feel really weirdly exhilarated by the new year and also like really anxious about how you're gonna pull yourself up to do new projects when you're feeling really, really bogged down with other projects that you may need to let go of or may have a lot more to do on, et cetera, et cetera. It gets cray-cray. So we want to talk about that today from the concept of writing from the overflow.
Okay, so I've noticed that I have like 3 habits at the beginning of every year. The first one is at the beginning of every year, I read more at the beginning of a year than any other time. I read more books in the first 3 months of a year than any other time of the year. And it's usually because I need to consume more books in order to be able to tell more stories, in order to be able to get more ideas. And I know specifically last year we had the first iteration of the Missy Elliott Readathon. And so that had me reading a lot of books. And we were coming off of Kwanzaa-thon, and that had me reading more books. And we had a lot of sequels coming out last year, and so that had me reading more books. So I think that a good place to start when coming out of a lot of writing is to do a lot of reading, at least for me. And I think it's because I know for me, when I am doing a lot of writing, I'm not doing a lot of reading because I don't want to intake a lot of other people's ideas, because I don't want to like mix storylines. I don't want to feel like I'm taking people's ideas and losing some of my own, or like even to the point where like sometimes I might even feel like I downplay my idea a little bit because I am reading another idea and I'm like, oh, well, maybe this makes more sense because this is already out there type of deal. I think that imposter syndrome can get a lot louder when you're reading other people's works while you're trying to work on your own, I believe, for me personally. And so I think that when you're thinking about writing from the overflow, when you're thinking about creating and filling your creative well, a good place to start is to increase your intake of creative things. And so one way for me is to increase my reading.
No, I think that's a really good one. I'm reading all year round. And part of it is I totally get what you're saying. And I think I do maybe in some ways. In some ways, I think I consume less. I don't necessarily stop reading in a particular genre, but I do read less. And if I get really wrapped up into a story and it feels like it is affecting my ability to write, or that's just, I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be really cool for me to try. That's when I'm like, we already have an outline that we like a lot. Let's stay in love with our own ideas and not get in too much of, because especially when I'm liking a book, especially if it's by a Black person, I'm in fan mode. I'm just like, this is amazing. Everyone go read this. And I'm like, right. Totally be a fangirl for all these beautiful Black creatives, but also you got to give that same energy to being a fan of your own work. And so if I find a book that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really good, deserves all the fan vibes, sometimes I may like pause it until I'm done with a particular scene. If I'm reading, like I'm in the fun and games of mine, and the fun and games of theirs is like totally giving me fan vibes. I just want to scream all about it. I'm like, let me pause their fun and games and focus on my fun and games so I can make sure that I'm not mixing ideas, so that I can make sure that I'm giving the energy that my characters deserve, like all of those different things. So it depends. I don't necessarily like stop fully, but I do just monitor closely how I'm feeling about other people's writing, as according how I'm feeling about other people's writing, and then how I'm feeling about my own, and then I monitor and adjust as necessary. So that's one thing. I guess I'll stop there since I gave my parallel. What's your second thing that you were saying?
The second thing I would say is I create more in other ways. So I noticed that like at the beginning of the year, I start more blankets. Do I finish them is a whole nother story. Or I'm painting more, I'm coloring more, I'm drawing more. Even if you notice on my channel at the beginning of the year, there are more crochet with me. Is there more color with me? Is there are more of those at the beginning of the year than at the end of the year? There are more write with me. There are more of those at the beginning of the year every year, because it's so much easier at the start of the year. Even thinking about like in general, how we are with resolutions. At the beginning of the year, we're just so much more on fire at the beginning of the year than as time progresses, right? But generally, because I am so drained of creativity at the end of the year, especially because Kwanzaa is a big undertaking for that week, especially because you are being so intentional on the things for those 7 days leading up to the new year, that in those days I'm very conscious of going into January like, yo, I want to do things with my hands. I want to be creating. I want to be doing things. I want to be and I noticed that also in the beginning of the year, I'm volunteering more. January, February, March, I'm out at the SPCA more. I'm out picking up trash more. I'm just doing more things in the beginning of the year and putting myself out there physically to do more things. Now, mind you, I'm not around humans because y'all know me. I don't like people. But more things that require me to be outside of my space, outside of these 4 walls, right? Like I take longer walks with the dogs at the beginning of the year. All these things I'm thinking about, dang, you do a lot more in January through March than the rest of the year. Like the walks get shorter. Now, mind you, they get more walks throughout the day during the rest of the year, but they don't be nearly as long as the 30-minute walk January through March in the morning. Like that's a whole different thing. But I think about just the ways in which I need to be moving. I need to be doing something. And when you think about it, y'all know me in mental health, that's important, right? Because if you're also thinking about seasonal depression, right? January is a very hard, tumultuous time, right? Coming off of holidays into New Year's, and everybody's new year, new me, everybody battling with bad decisions they made with food over the holidays, bad decisions they made with families, exes, strangers over the holidays, all these things, right? I think about how you could be getting yourself moving and how that could be filling your creative well, right? We've talked about this before in conversations about filling your creative well, about ways in which we've gotten ideas going on walks for stories. Like we've definitely talked about that, like how we've seen different things that have been like famously Penelope's Curve came from a walk in the dogs in the park, right? So that's another thing that I was thinking about, just like movement and having to do something. I feel like I talked for a whole long time.
It's okay. It seems longer because we mute, and like in the beginning we used to just like you could hear all the ad-libs and like yeah, but now we mute to make sure the sound doesn't get distorted, which I hate. I hope that people can like read my lips as I'm like yeah. seasonal depression were said at the same time. Yeah. Like you're just not getting the same razzle dazzle. We want y'all to get the razzle dazzle from the sound quality, so sacrifices must be made. Anyway, so yeah, no, Shay gave us that mental health thing, and I will sort of piggyback on that and take it in a different direction. Especially because I feel a lot different going into January this year than I have in previous years, because this is the first January I'm experiencing where I've dedicated myself to self-publishing. Prior Januaries, it's been, I'm coming off of Preptober, and like I'm feeling all those things that Shay talked about at the beginning of like, oh my gosh, Nano, and did I get all the words I needed, and did I revise that project the way I needed to for Hitman? Like, oh my gosh, did I get into this program that I applied to with We Need Diverse Books? Like all of these different things that we're all trying to be different ways to shoot the shot into TradPub, to make the right connections, to get an agent, like all of those different things, right? That really messed up my mind for January, and I didn't stop and think about it as that messed up my mind for January. I was just like, this is the grind. But it did sort of mess up my mind, and it made it really hard for me to be able to let projects go. Because how do you? There's really no separation. You're submitting a project over and over and over again, and then you have things to submit to in January. So it just seems like, as far as the writing goes, there is no new year for your writing projects, because the deadlines are still deadlining. So what are you to do? And so for this year, I'm really happy, really grateful that I'm going into January like, yes, I did Nano, and Nano did what I needed. Did I take a project from a 0 draft to a full first draft? No, I didn't, and that wasn't the plan. The plan was to finish #3rd Fantasy, and I did that. Was it just Act 3? Yep. But is it done? Yep. That was the goal. The goal was gotten. Amen. So like, I think just being more in charge of my final quarter of 2022 is making me feel a lot more serene going into 2023. And I think that's part of filling your creative well, is retain autonomy. And we don't think about it as being out of control. It's because it's us who are choosing to go after these opportunities. And it's us deciding to do TradPub. It's us deciding to want an agent. It's us deciding to submit and all the different routes. Like, it's us, it's our decision. But when it's making you feel rushed beyond what you want, give yourself the opportunity and permission to make a different decision. Even if it's like, no, I still want to do TradPub, that's fine. But do you need to be submitting to 5 things in 2 months if the project isn't done? Right. Because that's what's the stressful part. And agents say it every year. If your project isn't done, do not participate in all these little Twitter pitches. Because then you're pressed because I want to read it. And when I give you the request, I really mean like right now. And you're like, can I have 2 weeks? And then they're like, no, that's not really how this works. Right. So like a lot of stress because the deadlines feel like bosses, like they need this right now, and then you go into January feeling like drained and not in control. But I feel a lot more autonomous in my writing process going into January because I have the ability to choose when and what I do, and that also fills my creative well. When I trust that I can do whatever I decide, and I can do it whenever I decide, that gives my mind permission to continue to imagine, not to foreclose ideas because I have to focus on #1st Fantasy because I have 3 deadlines in the next 3 weeks, right? So I think that also is a thing that's like very writing, but it impacts your mental health. Anything that's going to foreclose your imagination is connected to your mental health. So I think that just being very cognizant of how autonomous do you feel in your writing journey is a way to monitor, am I feeling my creative well, or do I feel like I might sort of be in a drought? And where is that lack coming from?
Well, no, I totally agree with that. I totally agree. I think that there are a lot of things that as we have progressed through writing on YouTube and being in these spaces that are normalized, that as we have gone through, we realize, one, they're normalized and they shouldn't be. 2, they are unhealthy. And 3, they are not things that we want for our state of being and our way of writing, right? Like, so there are things that that have led us to completely be like, okay, we know that self-publishing is for us, because there are things that, as we have seen going through, we're like, okay, this is a very unhealthy lifestyle to have, and how this is, and seeing how everyone else is dealing with this and having to go through this, we don't want, right? And I think that there's something to be said about the way in which rejection is dealt with in this space, and the way in which rejection builds this unhealthy productivity mindset in the writing community. The way in which rejection is kind of drilled into us as is because we're not doing enough. Is because we don't understand the craft enough. Is because we have to just keep rewriting and keep rewriting and keep rewriting and keep rewriting. And again, it goes back to what you were saying about not knowing when to let a story go, not knowing when to move on, right? Not knowing when it's like, maybe no, this just wasn't the story you were meant to tell.
And can I offer the other side of that road? Because there is that rejection is because you're not ready, you're not there yet. But there's also the very well-meaning and also true of like, well, rejection, there's rejection because it's very subjective, right? When you apply to agents, where you submit to agents, and even that word submits, we should talk about that sometime. But anyway, when you're querying to agents, and they send back a rejection, most of the form rejections say, don't take this to heart. I'm just not the one for your story. It doesn't mean your story is not good enough. I'm just not the right one to fight for. It just didn't catch me. I have to be very selective with my list right now. But they all point to, it's not you, it's me. It's just very subjective. And that can also make you feel like, well, freak, if there's nothing for me to do, if you're like, oh, it's not the story, I just don't want it right now, like that can also make you feel like, so it's good, you just don't want it. And depending on who that response is coming from, we can read into those things, right? But it definitely, there's two sides to that constant rejection, and both of them are very tiring and very frustrating.
No, and I think, again, there's so many different conversations that we have had over the last 3 years about what these rejections are really saying, and what the things that get accepted are saying, along with the things that are getting rejected, right? And so it's those things combined with the work you put in October and November and December, and then coming into January and seeing the things that got picked up over November and December and January, and the things that you didn't get picked up. And it's a lot. January is a month that has a lot going on for writers. There is a lot that you have to deal with in that month if you are actively participating and trying to get your work traditionally published in those months. To be truly honest, there is. And there is something to be said about finding a way to find solace and peace in your creative abilities. And I feel that in this conversation, I want to make sure that we're saying that find your peace in something other than your writing at this time. Take a moment to find something that allows you to step away from your words, step away from your expectations of your words, step away from other people's expectations of your words, step away from the work of your words, and find peace in something else for a little while, so that you can come back to that and be your best creative self. Because you need that time. You need that time away. You need that time to heal. You need that time to rejuvenate. You need that time to be able to create again. You need that time to refill, recharge. You need that. And the truth is, you can find that in words, but you need to take a step away from words in that. You know, maybe you can journal, right? Like, not even necessarily, it doesn't have to be words completely. Maybe it's just fiction words. Maybe you need to delve into nonfiction. Maybe you need to just look into yourself inwardly and dive into philosophy, dive into yourself, dive into what is fueling you to write right now. Dive into reflecting on yourself and you as a writer in the past year. Dive into focusing on what you want to see yourself grow in as a writer in the next year. Focus on something other than just the creative works for just a little while.
And I would say, like, writing helps us process, right? So for some people, they're like, I didn't need to put the pen down and not write anything for all of January. Cool, fine, do that. And for some people, they're like, I don't know how to think without writing. That's how I process information, is by like writing my way to understanding. Fine, then just like take a break from writing for others, right? Like when we write stories, we're writing them to be read. It's not the same thing as writing a journal that's just for you. So then just take January not to be working on your for audience writing and focus on your for me, for my eyes only writing, because that's also a break, because there's a lot to be said for the pressures of the audience that you're writing for infringing upon your mental space. So writing is not the issue, it's all of the baggage that comes with writing when you're writing for publication. So then just write for yourself. Write something that you have no intention of anyone else ever seeing. And I would also say, like, we need to live. We're writers. We are representing experiences. Go have some experiences. Go live. Go figure out something, right? Like, go have experiences that's only going to make your writing richer. And I would say for myself, like, again, like the sort of not flip side, but alongside what Shay was saying about, like, get out there and find yourself outside of writing. I think that's so important. Like, what else is important to you? Go invest in that, because certainly for the last quarter of the year, you kind of have to sacrifice other things to meet deadlines. It's time to go reinvest in those things that had to wait. They can't wait forever. It's better for you and people that you care about if they don't wait forever. So now it's a good time to make the writing wait and really to let it marinate so you can come back with fresh eyes, fresh perspectives. If I was only ever working on pushing out first fantasy, drafting second fantasy, pushing out third fantasy, then I would never have come to even wanting to do first romance, right? Like, that came from me really studying my Bible, which I do all year, but like, again, like just investing in different parts of yourself that are not based in writing, studying what is my purpose, what does God want from me, studying how can I be better, how can my life be a sacrifice, what parts of my life are not really intentionally dedicated to God, and then thinking about, like, oh, I'm consuming too much of this like very over sexualized content. Okay, eventually it came back to, what if I got into romance and like sex was not the center of intimacy? And now my writing is richer for the time that I took away to really just think of myself otherwise, to think of myself not as a writer, just to consider myself and what's important to me, which obviously y'all know for me is God, right? So really investing in the things that are not writing, but also investing in the parts of yourself that are not only and primarily a writer. What else are you? A daughter, a sister. Like, go invest in those parts of yourself and those relationships that will make your writing better. Your next sister relationship is going to be bomb. Your next mother-daughter relationship, mother-son relationship, going to be bomb. Like, invest in those things, because it gives it more life in the writing when it's fresh on your mind and on your heart.
And again, it brings back another meaning to be the change you want to see, right? So That's really all I got. I don't feel like we need too much more than that. Like, it's very simple, get out there, get outside of your works, get outside of the writing space. I know for us, a lot of the creative ideas we get are when we are outside of our little writing bubbles, and we take time outside of ourselves to see things outside of this space. So don't confine yourself to your world. Let yourself get out there and see some other things. And definitely let us know what you did this January in the comments to feel your creative well. Let us know how it went. We would love to know what new ideas came to you for your stories this year. So definitely let us know in the comments.
Yes, I just wanted to say one more thing, because I don't think I ever actually said how this writing from the overflow, like that metaphor came to be. We just sort of jumped into it. And I don't remember. Yeah, I was like, I didn't have to. Yeah. So it was a conversation that Shay and I were having, which was possibly in a different writerly conversation, possibly like right after we pressed record on a writerly conversation. I cannot remember. But essentially the writing from the overflow for me is coming from like how I was taught to teach, particularly in Bible class. Like you have this, you want to teach your students a particular thing. They may get it as quickly as you want, they may not, but you can't teach for the accolades or the appreciation of your student. You have to be teaching from the overflow. You have to study this topic extensively so that what comes out in the classroom is the overflow of knowledge that you have already fed yourself. And now you're like, oh my gosh, this topic is so rich because you have richly engaged. And so in thinking about teaching from the overflow is how I have like engaged with that metaphor of the well. The writing from the overflow for me is when I talk about an idea in a book, when I talk about a particular representation or a concept, that should be the overflow of passion, the overflow of knowledge, the overflow of insight, the overflow of experience, that I'm not that I'm not having to do like a rain dance to bring an idea into fruition. It's something that I'm already passionate about, something that I've already invested a lot of thought in, and I've already talked to lots of people about. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I feel so much for this thing that I have to put it out there. And so we mostly talked about like what can get in the way of writing from the overflow and how to just like refill your well in a very just like how do you recover from the final quarter, from the fourth quarter of the last year, of the previous year. But in getting to the place where you're actually writing from an overflow, not simply filling your well, that's where again that like going and having other experience really helps you, because that when you come back, when you've lived fully, you are writing from a full heart, right? And so if you take nothing else from this, writing from the overflow is really before you are accountable to an audience or an agent or an editor or a publisher, you have to be fully in love with that idea. And then that love comes out on the page because you are fully engaged with it. You're fully okay with it. Before it's even available to anyone else to reject. You're fully in love with the idea and the concept. And then the overflow, the excess, the rest, the extra comes out on the page, but you're fully at peace with it. And we'll talk more about that later and probably conversations to come about projects, moving through projects, moving on from projects, et cetera, et cetera. But before you move through or move on, you got to write from the overflow. Come on, somebody.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right, you guys will definitely let us know how you are getting into filling your creative well and what writing from the overflow looks like for you this January. Let us know in the comments, and we will see you next time on Britt's channel for our February writer release conversation. Y'all have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Bye.